Welcome to the Pro Aging Podcast. I'm Steve Gurney, founder of the Positive Aging Community. We're excited that you can join us for our interactive discussions with pioneers and thought leaders on a wide variety of topics related to aging and longevity. Today we have a conversation with Steven Petrow, who's an award-winning journalist and book author who's best known for his Washington Post and New York Times essays on aging and health. We caught Steven on his tour for his new book, Stupid Things I Won't Do When I Get Old. So let's jump into the discussion with Steven Petrow. Right. So Jill Berkman from Montcordia called me and she said, Steve, I just saw this amazing author on the Today Show, and I think you should get him on one of your discussions. And I said to her, wow, Jill, that's great. And is there any way that you could see if you could make a connection or reach out, and then we'll figure out how we're going to make this happen? And bless your heart, Jill. I mean, you attacked that challenge and got Steven together, and here we are today. But before we dive in to meeting Steven and talking about his book, tell us about yourself and Montcordia.
Sure. Thank you, Steve, so much for partnering with us on this project. I think I actually cornered you at an event and begged you to do it with me, and brought Steven up on my phone. And I was really super excited about Steven's book. So I'm really happy that we could bring the speaker to you today. I'm Jill Berkman. I'm the Business Development Manager for Montcordia Home Care and Care Management. For those of you who've worked with us in the last year, you know that Montcordia is not like other home care agencies. What makes us unique? We target a more discerning client that's looking for a different kind of care partner. We hire less than 1% of the applicants that we receive. We train them 1,500% more than the average agency, including Ritz-Carlton's customer service training. All of our care partners drive, cook, care for plants and pets, and they only work for Montcordia. We offer personal care, companion care, and geriatric care management in Montgomery County, and companion care and care management in DC, Loudoun County, and Fairfax County. We aren't for everyone. We do cost a little bit more for this level of service, but the demand has been huge. And because we're so different, we do partner with other care management and home care agencies. So if you have any questions about Montcordia, please contact me. I'll put my information in the chat. And I'm really, really excited to be here with you and Steven. Thank you.
This is great. And I dropped your info in the chat, but definitely
Thank you.
Can double up. As you can see, chat's kind of exploding there. But okay. Well, this is great. So let's not waste any more time. Let's bring Steven Petrow to the stage. And he is the author of Stupid Things I Won't Do When I Grow Old. Steven, we're excited to dive into the book. But before we do that, let's get to know you a little bit better. Tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to write this book.
Well, first of all, let me say how glad I am to be with the two of you and with everyone who is joining us today. I also want to apologize. I'm a little bit nasal. I've been having sort of the last part of COVID the last week. So if I sound a little stuffy, I am a little stuffy and addicted to Sudafed today. And I guess this is one of the great things about being virtual. Nobody's has any chance of becoming infected by a virtual event like this. I also have to say, just looking at the folks who are in the audience, you're all so well schooled and do the hard work in this area. It's just it's wonderful, and it's a little intimidating. So, you know, I'm a writer and a journalist. I'm not an expert in the ways that you all are. And Jill, I wanted to also thank you, especially for tracking me down and making the initial outreach. You know, and here we are. And Steve, it's just a pleasure. And it's good. You're Steve. I'm Steven. Nobody at all will get confused. So how did this book come to be? Well, it's probably now about 12 or 13 years ago. I was in my early 50s then. I'm 64 now. And my parents were in their 70s, and they had been very active and very engaged people for all their lives. And I noticed that they started doing some peculiar things, some odd things, some things that I thought were not in their best interest. And so I'm the eldest son. I'm kind of like the know-it-all. And so I started writing them down. I started keeping this list of what I was calling to myself stupid things I won't do when I become like my parents, when I get old. And that list started to grow, and it was meant to be a secret list. But then I'm a writer, and I thought, I think there's something in this for more people, a learning lesson. And my own list was a little bit snarky. My mom kept a very nice house, and she hated to bring up, and she wouldn't bring up the throw carpets, even though my dad started tripping on them and falling. Just things like that. She'd been a driver for a long time, and she started almost hitting people, and she did start hitting things. And so these were kind of things that went on the list. And so then I wrote this essay for the New York Times, and that was in 2017. And that really hit a nerve. It went viral, as they say, and it was on the most read list for about 2 weeks. But what astonished me the most was that then people started sending me the lists that they had been keeping. And so I realized, here I'm doing this thing, and I'm a little bit shameful about it, but a lot of people are doing the same thing. And in a way, they were doing it in a humorous way as well. But they were also, like me, trying to set a path how we might choose to do better by observing early on some of the roadmap problems that we could see. And so I took a lot of what others sent me, and then interviewing for this book, as well as my own experience, and that's how the book came to be. It's in its third printing now. I just heard this morning Russian rights have been sold, so it will soon be available in Russia, which amused me, coming from a Ukrainian background. And so that's kind of the backstory on it.
I love it. And it's almost like you've created this support group where if we all share our list, just imagine the resource that could be to generations to come.
To generations, or at least one or two. And I've been on book tour, both virtual and in real life. And one of the things that's really pleased me is that I've seen multi-generation groups come in, like mother-daughter, mother-son, where they've been reading the book together and having a conversation about some of these issues. And that is really a main point of the book. So I tried to bring humor to many of the topics, and you who work in the field, that sometimes humor can be lacking. These are very serious topics. We're talking about aging, we're talking about illness, sometimes disability, and obviously later on, death and dying. And so by bringing humorous situations from my family's life, I also hope to show, there are different ways into these conversations, and they don't have to be as scary as they might seem when you think, well, we're going to be talking about cemetery plots. And one of the latter stories in the book is my parents lived on Long Island, and my father, who was a journalist also, he would always go around saying, well, if I die, and then I would correct him, being, the whippersnapper, Dad, that's the wrong use of the subjunctive. It should be when I die. We're all going to die. And but anyway, one day we're out in Sag Harbor. We're looking for some plots, and they are both being very resistant, believe it or not. And they had canceled many times. And finally, we get out there, and my dad's wandering around, and I know what he's doing, and he's trying to, stall. But he comes back and he says, "Okay, I'm in. I saw the grave marker for Clay Felker over there." And Clay Felker was the founder of New York Magazine, another journalist like my dad. And he said, "Okay, this is a good neighborhood. I'm in." And then my mom, who was a psychotherapist, she knew that Clay had been married to Gail Sheehy, and that she had her spot over there. My mom said, "I'm in too." So that was kind of how we split into, a difficult conversation.
Wow. Well, I love it. And I want to sort of give people the context of the book. You've got these three parts, but I want to pick up on something that you just said there. And Jill, I know you'll agree with this, is that all of these things in sort of this space that we might call elder care, senior living, end of life, whether it be a cemetery plot or moving to a retirement community, I like how you framed it. This is an okay neighborhood for me, because one of the things that I've seen with a lot of the individuals that I talk to that might be thinking about or helping their mom and dad make a move to a community, it's sort of like, no, that's not for me. I can't go there. That's, old folks home, what have you. But once they get in the door, and if they see somebody from their organization of faith or a previous coworker or a neighbor that's living there, hey, this is an okay neighborhood. They're like me, So
that actually just happened to me with a friend. His mother refused to get hearing aids, and this is a big problem because she has dementia and she's isolating now, and she can't communicate with anyone on the phone, which has really diminished her quality of life and exacerbated her dementia. And it wasn't until a friend of hers decided she's getting hearing aids and she's going to Costco to get them that now suddenly she's willing to entertain the idea. So that does happen.
That does happen, and it reminds me. I'll tell two little stories here that are from the book. So, my parents, like many people, always said to myself, I have a brother and a sister, we don't want to be a burden to you. And then more often than not, they made decisions that wound up being burdensome. And the one that comes to mind as we're talking is they lived in a very remote part of Long Island. It was hard to get to. It's like a solitary road to get there. It was on a beach. It was subject to wind and snow and everything. And so we wanted them to look at continuing care facilities. And my brother took them to one in Connecticut near where he lived. It was a very nice place. And they did the tour, and then they went to the dining room, and there was a fancy fish dish on the menu. And my mother had long been she very outspoken about hating fish. And so my brother said, well, how did you like it? And she said, I hate fish. And that was like the end of the conversation. And then they proceeded to quote unquote age in place, and we had a number of emergencies and so on. It was not the easiest decision, but what I took away from that, because I have been trying to implement what I see. A couple of years ago, I was divorced, and I didn't really have a backup plan here. So I looked at some of the continuing care facilities where I live, and and it was a hard decision. But I put my money down and I got on a list, and that is one thing that I don't have to worry about in the same way, and that my siblings and nieces don't have to worry about either as much. So we actually then 4 of my friends followed me, so we're going to have our own little community there.
Yeah, I mean there is something about that. That's what it's about. It's about community, and it's not being segregated from your lifestyle and life, and in general, whether it be a hearing aid or a community, if you've got others in your tribe or a tribe that you might identify with, it makes it a lot better. So in fact, actually, I mean, one of the most brilliant things I think is the Margaritaville concept of active adult communities, because it's not necessarily a community for older people. It's a community for Jimmy Buffett fans, and I think we'll see more of that in the future. Well, as I had referenced, I love how you set up the book, and it's in 3 parts. And it's the first part is stupid things I won't do today. The second part is stupid things I won't do tomorrow. And the third, which you sort of shared us a little bit of that, stupid things I won't do at the end. Mm-hmm. Why don't we just kind of use that as our sort of conversation point? And I want to remind the audience too, to jump in if you've got comments or questions. It's best if you use the Q&A feature, because we've literally got hundreds of people on this call. The Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, just type in your questions, comments there, and we'll make sure that we address them. But Steven, what are the stupid things that you won't do today? What are some of the things that you have really gleaned from that list?
Well, first of all, let me just say I am following the chat here, and Barbara, I'm really glad that the column I wrote in the Washington Post about hearing aids was useful to you. And Robin Lerner, I saw you somewhere out there earlier, so hello. So it is divided into these three sections, and first part is more about what we can do now. Second part is a couple of years later, and then planning ahead. And so I'll read some of the chapter titles, and then I'll go a little bit deeper. But so the first chapter is I won't color my hair, even if it worked for Diane Sawyer. And I'll just tell you a little bit about that. It's probably about 20 years ago. I was co-hosting a benefit with Diane Sawyer. We were joking before we went on, and she's about 75 now. So she was 55 then, and I was, I guess, about 45. And she told me, the secret to getting older is an anchor. You don't get gray, you just get blonder. And so I was then also working at a startup, and I was the third eldest out of about 300. And I had this misadventure in hair coloring, which I'm not going to blame on Diane Sawyer because I have to blame it on my hair colorist. But it taught me some important lessons about authenticity and acceptance of who you are. So I have actually stopped doing that. This is real. I won't limit friends to my own age, and that's about the importance of having multi-generational friends, both older and younger, as a way to kind of stay in the swim of the conversation, have different perspectives. It really, it can really help us expand our worlds, and there are more and more studies that show that that it's very good for our health. One that has gotten a lot of attention is I won't double space after periods.
I still do that.
I do it too.
So I grew up, my grandmother was the typing teacher, and she taught me how to type on, an old Smith Corona, bam, 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 double space. And folks, with computers, we don't need to double space because the computer makes the space large enough for it to be visible, which is the point of the space. But it's definitely a hard habit to change. And the rest of the chapter is about integrating technology and finding ways to use technology and not being afraid of technology. But it starts off with that sort of the struggle that we have with the double space and what that represents. And the point being, let's try to find ways to retrain our brains because that'll help us connect more with people, which is really what we want to do. And,
boy, Steven, you hit a nerve on that. We've got a bunch of people. They're like, I'm a double spacer too. It's
Ruth, you're a resistor, of course.
Yeah, but I can see that would make a great T-shirt. I'm a double spacer, and the only people that would know what that means are people who were born before a certain day.
And then they'd say, "Okay, boomer."
Exactly. Okay, boomer. And it's so funny because that chapter, it wasn't. It's one of 43. I think it's gotten the most attention. And it's like, first of all, I didn't realize that, and second of all, I'm not going to change. And then, okay, it's been interesting. I also use a lot of my sort of what happens in my life to talk about issues, and that's kind of a method I've been using in the columns I write for the Washington Post and the New York Times. And so there's one here: I won't pass up a chance to pee, even when I don't think I have to. And that comes kind of after a near flood on the I-10 near Los Angeles several years ago, and looking into various devices. And now, it's just easier to go to the bathroom before you go to the theater, to a class, get on a trip, get on a plane. It's it's a good thing. So I kind of make fun of myself in that one. So, they're kind of in that vein. They talk a lot about, lifestyle issues and, and how we think about things. And, Steve, one of the things I'm hoping to do is just help us all become a little bit more aware of the day-to-day decisions we make. And so that we can start taking small steps to lead to bigger changes. And, one of the important points that I'm trying to make in the book is we tend to think about being old as a bad thing. And you folks who work in the field, you know about ageism. You see it all the time. You see what happens with internalized ageism. It's very harmful to us who take it on. And so in a way, by trying to make it more visible, I'm hoping that we can also change how we feel about being older. There's a very distinct difference between being older and becoming ill. They get very conflated in our world, in our culture.
And they're not. They should not be. People get ill. I've got an ill high school kid that hasn't been to school in the last 2 weeks because she's ill. It's not an age specific problem. Neither is disability. There's so many of us, through our lifetime, we break our legs. We need, to adapt. I love this from Mary Busey. She says, as I understand it, Hollywood has discovered the beauty of silver gray and white hair. I'm jealous. I'm over 80 years old and it doesn't look like I will ever get it. And that is a statement like that is what we need more of, is that to be proud of the marks of being older. Like, can the gray hair be a badge of honor as opposed to, feeling like I'm less than I used to be?
Yeah, I think obviously that's the point I'm making, but I will note, Steve and I have, what appears to be gray hair. There's a gender element to this conversation too, and I
agree.
It's easy for us to have, to say what we're saying. There are different standards for women, and the overall point is about authenticity to how you see yourself, and it's not necessarily about what color your hair is, but it's about understanding who you are and how you relate to the world. And Jill, your hair looks fabulous, whether it's natural or not.
Oh, yeah. That'll be my secret. A little bit of both.
Yeah.
I thought it was really interesting, and I think in this section you talked about some things that are actually like a detriment to your health. Lying to your doctor, I think, is something that all of us do, and none of us really acknowledge that we do. We want to seem like we're better than we are. We don't want to get them alarmed. We don't want to know what's wrong with us.
Yes, that's a chapter that's really important in terms of life and death, even. And I'm just saying what Deborah Dougherty said. Start with stating your age and not hiding it. Yes, and it's interesting. In many of the interviews I've been doing, beforehand, the host will say, "Is it okay if I ask you how old you are?" It's in the book, first of all, though I'm just about to be a year older. But, I think it is about being comfortable with that number and trying to, I love what Gloria Steinem has said for many decades now. This is the face of 60, this is the face of 70, and this is the face of 80. And I hope she goes on to be, this is the face of 90. But, it helps to change other perceptions of what it means to be a sexagenarian or an octogenarian, when people start associating active, vibrant people with certain, age groups. But going back to lying to our doctors, my dad did that a lot with his blood pressure medication and all sorts of things. And I was very much of a finger wagger on that. Dad, you've got to be more honest. It's for your own good. And then not long after that, I was on some antidepressant medication, and I decided, well, I was going to go cold turkey all by myself and not engage my doctor. let me just say that was a terrible mistake in terms of what happened and not sharing it with my doctor and getting some help. And and there are many reasons that people, especially around medications, they kind of go rogue. Sometimes the medications are expensive; they want to extend them. Oh, antibiotics, you don't really need to finish that course. Yes, you do need to finish that course. And a doctor can really only be a good partner if they have, the kind of information that is there. So it's important,
And a lot of people, I think, self-diagnose and spend too much time on the internet researching their medications and decide how much is good for them. And the doctor doesn't know. I could take half of this. I think I'll be fine.
Who needs a doctor when you have the internet, right? Not.
Steven, Deb Merrimer, who I'm assuming she's got a copy of your book, because she says, you mentioned that we older adults tend to participate in organ recitals. Can you speak to the downside of such discussions and how to diffuse them?
Absolutely. Actually, maybe I'll just read that first paragraph of that chapter.
Oh, great. Oh, that's...
let's see where that is. Yeah. I never can. Oh, yeah, 48. I won't join the organ recital. It starts out innocently enough. You sympathize with a friend who's had minor surgery, or mention your own high blood pressure diagnosis. And a few short years later, every social event becomes a chorus of sticky joints, cataracts, or way worse. It can happen anywhere, at any gathering, anytime a few people of a certain age get together. First, the fanfare. What's new with you? Then the overture, the high cholesterol, the prediabetes, and the bum knee. Before you know it, music swells, and it's a full-blown concert of sciatica, angina, and replacement joints. Welcome to the front row of the worst musical review imaginable. You're at an organ recital.
I love it. I've never thought of it that way, but that's exactly what it is. Yep.
And my point there is sometimes these conversations can just completely dominate, an evening or an outing. And that's not a good thing. Yes, we all have various issues, some of them not serious, some of them more serious. But when you think about how we're presenting ourselves and then how we're understanding ourselves, we're not our illnesses. And we need to sort of, keep those separate. And, especially if other folks and younger folks are listening in, go, oh, these 50 or these 60 plus people, that's all they talk about. They're just like one condition or another. Well, we're much more than that. And, we're our travels, we're our work, we're our kids, our grandkids, so on and so forth. So just kind of, my point is be aware of that. Don't let our conditions define us. And again, I'm trying to bring a little bit of humor to this. And I just also want to say, for serious illness, it is important to reach out and talk to people and to get support. And that's really, that's a different ball of wax than some of the minor things or more minor things.
I just glanced down at chat, and Steve Lawn says, unfortunately, these conversations happen to those of us in our 40s and 50s, let alone the older generation. I want to remind Steve is that remember when 40s and 50s was really old? I mean, it's interesting. And at whatever age we are at, we don't define it as old. I mean, you run into people who are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, and they don't define themselves as old. It's always what's out there in the future. And that's, what you're saying in your part two is stupid things I won't do tomorrow. Like that's sort of in the future. I'm glancing at the table of contents, and I wanted to get your thoughts on the chapter that says, I won't keep driving when I become a threat to others, because this is something that those of us who are in this field deal with on a regular basis, is hearing the stories of getting the car keys away or the concern that mom or dad is going to hurt somebody. I'm curious about your thoughts on that topic.
Absolutely. And Ellen Sturkis, I see your post there, my post-cancer mantra. I have some problems, but I'm alive to bitch about them. I'm a cancer survivor too. Congratulations to you. Yes, we're alive, and that's a good thing. Yeah. So that chapter, the chapter about driving, was the most painful chapter for me to write, and it was born of one of the most painful experiences in our family's life. I mentioned a little bit at the beginning. My mother loved to drive. She was a very independent woman. When she turned 80, she bought herself a fire engine red sports car. She was a little old lady with scoliosis, but she had a bright red sports car. And she began having some difficulties with the car, and she said it was the design of the car. So she traded the car in. Okay. But it got worse, and she hit a couple of cars, and then she almost hit a couple of people. My siblings and I, we had various conversations with her, and then we actually staged, sort of an informal intervention. We were all there. I told her we were all worried for her, and we tried as best we could to be empowering and to also present other solutions. When we were there, we could drive her. They had a health aide who lived with them. She could help, Uber, Lyft, so on and so forth. And so we finished, and she said, thank you all very much for your concern. F you all. And that was my mom in a nutshell. And then what we did, we made a secret pact among the three siblings, and this was in New York State, and we filed a complaint. And so that triggered that she had to come in and take both the written test and the road test, and she failed those. Lucky for us, just before she got called in, she had hit a neighbor's car, and she forever thought it was the neighbor who had been the snitch and not any of her children. And we kept that a secret. We did tell the neighbor that we really appreciated the fact that he could be our straw man on this. But that was the only way that we could come to a way to protect other people and to protect her. But it was it was really challenging, and it was interesting. She put everything related to that in a Ziploc bag before she died, including the report from the road instructor, which was harsh. And I felt like she was, she was sending me a message for the future. Okay, take your own medicine when it comes to this when the time comes. And believe me, I hope that that's one that I will do, because it has a lot of serious effect.
Yeah, I mean, I see some of the comments where somebody responded that your DMV was very responsive. I know that this is a big challenge for folks, and I know that that folks struggle, and your story has a much happier ending than others.
Right.
The other thing that I think this also speaks to, and you addressed it in the beginning, is being in a car dependent environment. Like if you're in Long Island, down a long driveway out, at this beachfront home that was wonderful when you had easy access to a car, when driving is more of a challenge, your mom may not even want to drive, but she has to drive because of where she lives to get to the things that are purposeful in her life. And this sort of speaks to another reason why looking into a life plan community like you have might be a choice, not to be a burden on the people around you.
Yeah, but I also see that Joe Sperling wrote, "Cars represent freedom," and in the conversations that we had with our mom and with our parents, really, very much aware of that, and very much aware of that to me now. And how much of a challenge that is to restrict that, and sort of a related conversation. As my dad was tripping over the throw rugs of my mom's, he was also resisting using a cane, using a walker, and I remember having conversations with him about making trade-offs. And if you do this, if you use the cane, hopefully you will prevent a more serious fall, or if you use the walker when it came to that. And because the goal was to maintain your independence, to maintain your mobility, to be able to stay in contact with people. And that was a conversation that we had frequently, but that did not make enough progress on, because in the end, like my grandfather, my father had a serious fall, and that precipitated his passing in the end. And, I do wonder, how much is genetics? Here I've written this book. Here I think I'm mindful about these issues, and am I just going to be another male descendant of the Petrow family? I hope not.
Well, I think I like this approach. Like I said, you've almost created a support group. It's sort of if we all sort of create a list like you did, and we talk about it and reflect on it, it can hopefully minimize us repeating the things that drove us crazy about the generations in front of us, and look at the world through a different perspective.
And I'd like to say that as poignant as that story is about taking the keys away from your mother, I have it dog-eared in my book because it's just one of the funniest passages that I've read. And I think we've all sat down with somebody, an older adult, who we've, tried to intervene and meant well and presented all the benefits of what we'd like them to change. And they've looked at us and said, go F yourself. So we've all been there.
No, this is great. Now, you've got a chapter, it says, I won't be unkind to those with dementia. Can you give us some insight on that? Because again, this is another very hot topic that we talk about in these discussions is dementia. Yeah.
So I'll just tell this story a little bit. And I don't remember exactly when this was, but maybe it was 15 years ago. And so I was visiting my parents on Long Island, and I was standing next to my mom when the phone rang, and it was a call for me. And I heard my friend Holly ask for me. And my mom said, oh, there's nobody by that name here. And I was like, Mom, what are you talking about? I'm right here. And I was kind of, upset and a little aggressive, like, Mom. And that was the beginning of her dementia. But I didn't know, and she didn't know. And so it took a long time for me to realize that I needed to find more of the empathy in my heart and more compassion. And the way I actually found it was I had a Jack Russell Terrier who was about 16 and developed dementia. And this poor little dog would stand in the corner and not be able to find its way out of the corner. And then this mournful howling. And that's when I realized I needed to open my heart to the dog, but I really needed to take that lesson and be much more, open and accommodating with my mom. And later on, we have this happening where she's going to the bathroom, but she's completely confused, and she's has a severe dementia at this point. And she goes to the dresser, and she pulls the dresser drawer out, and she uses that as a toilet. And old Steven would have been so judgmental and so upset in the mess. And I just said, hey, Mom, let's go clean you up and get you back to bed. And she said that's great. She wasn't really aware of what happened, but I think that's the kind of kindness that we need, that we need to find that's hard. Because we're losing people that we love. I thought it was she couldn't remember my name, but it was really about I'm losing somebody that means so much to me.
Yeah, no, great reminder. And it's, one of the things for the professionals and providers that are in our audience, the virtual dementia tour, which was created several years ago, gives you a glimpse of what it might be like to, be challenged with dementia. And after you go through that experience, it's also another way to develop the empathy that you developed in caring for your mom. And that's very difficult, because it's very easy to just get frustrated because you know what she was like. And it's hard to look at a loved one that's with that behavior. Mary Williams says, she's somebody that read your book. She says, this book is a great resource for talks with our adult kids. Have the conversations with them now so that we can clearly articulate what we want, saying things out loud, or even write them down into a contract. Great suggestions there, Mary. And I want to mention to everybody in the audience, because I've received 2 or 3 comments, everybody's trying to cut and paste some of the great thoughts that are being shared in chat. Don't worry, we're going to copy all of chat, and it will be right under the recording of this discussion. So you could share that with your loved ones, or, review it later.
Paula, Christy, and Joe, I hear you on your stories and on dementia. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the clock. We got about 15 minutes till the top of the hour here. And I want to, I was glancing at the chapter that says, I won't let anyone else write my obituary. I'm curious, share some of your thoughts on that one.
That's from the last part of the book, and basically that section of the book is about what the subjunctive joke I made earlier. It's not if I die, it's when I die, and how can we put things in order as best possible for those who love us and who may be burdened with some of that. And and I talk earlier on about it's called Swedish death cleaning. It's basically Marie Kondo for decluttering, but it's a practice that they start in the Scandinavian countries, usually in their 60s, of starting to get rid of the things that you've accumulated, so that when you do pass, you don't have a house or 2 households, full of stuff. And the obituary is, I interviewed a couple of people who had written their obituaries for different reasons. One woman really wanted, her story as a woman and as a feminist to be told from her perspective. So she's written it and she updates it regularly. I remember someone else said, he was very keen on grammar, and he knew that no one else in his family, would do him right with grammar, so he was going to do it himself. But I think in a way, in the end, it's another task that you might be able to take off the table from someone, but it's also a way for you to leave how you want to be remembered. This is my story by me, so to speak, and that can be an important part of family lore. So that, and I think most of us know the legal and the medical stuff that we need to do, and I don't get in, I reinforce all that, but that's very well handled by other folks.
Yeah, and honestly, I why that chapter title resonated with me is that anytime I go to a service, I'm just that's the thought that goes through my mind. It's sort of like, it would be nice if I could write down how I want people to remember me, and at least have it there for somebody to share. Usually
they're really, this just reminds me, I had a friend, Steve, who when he turned 50, for his 50th birthday party, he asked everybody to come with a eulogy written about him. Almost all of the time, eulogies are after the fact. And so he put himself out on the dining room table, and everyone went around and read their eulogy. But it was really beautiful. It sounds a little macabre, but it was really wonderful.
What a great idea! And when you were talked about the Swedish
death cleaning.
Death cleaning. I had to double check because the Washington Post, I'm throwing it into the into chat. The Washington Post did a great article on a couple that held a party in their house to facilitate that that cleaning. And the reason I checked it because I was like, I wonder if he wrote that article. No, that's great. Okay. Well, folks, we got about 10 minutes, and I usually I'm paying attention to the clock here because normally we get to about 3 minutes to go, and then all of a sudden folks start throwing in these questions at the last minute. So I'm giving you a 10-minute warning. If there's anything that you would like Steven to share thoughts on, if you've got a question or comment that you want to make sure that goes beyond just the group chat right there. And I see Ruby Neeson says, there's a publication called 5 Wishes that helps tell those who you love what you want done as you age and how you want people to remember you. Yeah, the 5 Wishes document is great. And that also goes beyond in terms of dealing with advanced medical directives and, things like that. So thanks, Ruby, for sharing that resource with everybody.
And Steve and Jill, that reminds me, sometimes people ask me, how have I changed as a course of writing this book? And, one important way that I've come to see was, I would say 10 years ago, so then I was in my mid-50s, I was very focused, or almost exclusively focused on what I would call resume values or virtues. And what was my job title? How much money was I making? How many people was I managing? It was very, externally validated. And I guess as I kind of moved past 60 and into my 60s, I've thought more and more, gosh, I don't want people to remember me by my job title. And things like that, and sort of think more about what's called they're called the eulogy virtues, but the characteristics, the qualities that made up someone, that makes up someone. And I don't think it's ever too early to think about those and try to live a life that is as much focused on that as as providing for your loved ones and your family. And that's been like one of the biggest shifts for me.
And I think usually that wisdom comes later in life when you realize what's been important and what isn't important. And unfortunately, it's at the end of your life when you realize that. And it is good to realize it a little bit sooner so you can focus on other things. You have 2 good chapters about not being able to control, or not worrying about what you can't control, right, and not being disappointed with your life.
Yeah, and the chapter about not being disappointed, very soon before my father passed, he asked me, we were sitting there, and he wasn't a deeply introspective person. And then he asked me, well, what matters to you? And I was like, that's not a question my dad usually asks. And I thought, well, that's an important question. And I kind of stumbled through it, but I was married at the time. I said my spouse and my family, my health, my siblings, my work. And then I said to my dad, well, how about you? And he was a very successful journalist and professor. He had been somewhat, estranged from our family, and he just sat there and then shrugged his shoulders. And that made me so sad because there were so many reasons for him to be able to understand how he had mattered to us, but he wasn't feeling it. And so I think it's a great exercise, an important exercise, no matter where you are in this continuum of age, to think about and sometimes to make course corrections too.
Well, no, great. Boy, what a great insight, and glad that you caught that, because these are the types of things that it's easy to miss. It's easy, you're having a conversation and that's just mom or dad. But really listening and drawing insight that can improve your life is very important. Let's see. Elva Roy says, how can I invite Steven to speak to a future Zoom meeting for a group I lead in Arlington, Texas? They're called the Ambassadors for Aging Well. Steven, would you, what's the best way for people to reach out if they'd like to get you to speak to your group?
I'm happy to talk with you about that. I can put my email in here, or you can reach out to Steve or Jill and they can forward anything along.
So Elva, just shoot us an email and we'll make sure that we get Steven's contact. And that goes for anybody in the audience that would like to connect with.
The chat, it's going by so fast. I'm glad we're going to get it at the end too, because there's amazing stuff in there and I wish I could respond to everybody right now.
Yep. And let's see, Bob Hoffman says, does Steven know anything about the use of video for end-of-life issues, planning, and decision-making? Meaning sort of recording video, the way that, talking about, I won't die without writing letters. I mean, as we double spacers know, writing letters is not the only way to communicate now. There's video and things like that. Have you encountered anything on using video for end-of-life messages?
Absolutely. There are a number of services out there. You can pre-record them all, and then when your next of kin notifies the service that you've passed, they will hit send. That's one of them. I find that a little creepy, like all of a sudden it's going to be there without any warning. But
I think they have holograms now.
Where there's all kinds of stuff.
That's creepy.
What is that?
A hologram.
Hologram. Oh yeah. Oh gosh.
Yep. Let's see. Oh, this is great. Sharon Rose says, Steven, what is your next book? Research Joys of Aging Well. Do you have anything that you're working on?
I am working on something new, and it has not been born yet as something that I can sort of talk about eloquently, but expect to see something new from me soon.
Great.
And I just want to mention Steven's articles, which I have read over the years, didn't realize, I didn't make the connection till after I had gotten the book. But his articles are online too, and they're in Washington Post and New York Times and a bunch of other publications. Really entertaining.
Thank you, Jill. Yes.
Oh yeah. No, we were saying before this started, I know when I've got a really good discussion that's going to be really popular, because there's only been two that my parents have brought up. And one, my mom, I had Matt Paxton of Hoarders, and she's like, oh, I can't believe that you have Matt Paxton. And my dad said, I really want to tune in to Steven Petrow. I want to hear what he has to say. So you've got a great fan club out there, and you've got a great way of really taking some challenging topics and making them a lot more digestible.
Steve, I want to just call out your newsletter, because I heard from a number of people who received that this week, who follow it and speak highly of you. So Mutual Admiration Society, it's not just about our names.
Well,
a lot of Steve in the conversation today too.
Yeah, and but really, in sort of closing, because we are wrapping up to the top of the hour, just a reminder of how powerful we are as a community on any given topic. This is, and I just love doing these things, because you just see that in the audience, we've got just such great comments and resources and ideas, and coming together on this topic. I think if there's one thing that I sort of love about your book and using this as a discussion point, is using this as an encouragement for everybody to make the list of those stupid things that you're not going to do when you're old. But don't wait. Like, old is right now. Like, let's make it happen right now, and sharing our lists and our ideas with each other.
Well, so, it's half about, I always thought, I'm just going to keep making my list. I'm never going to have to do anything with this list. It's like with stocks. You need to know when to buy, you need to know when to sell. So you need to make your list, and then you need to start implementing your list. That's hard.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So, and if you figure out the stock thing, definitely write a book on that so that we can all figure that one out. Well, this has been an awesome discussion. Jill, would you like to, do you have any sort of closing thoughts? And then Steven, and then we'll get this recording up as soon as possible.
I just thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I'm just such a fan of the book. Like I said, if you get the chance, read the book. It is lighthearted and also really educational, and will make you stop and think about some of the things that you could do to acknowledge, where you're headed in life, and some habits that you might want to break, and some habits that you might want to adapt. And it's for all ages, really. So I thank you so much for being here. And I thank everyone for attending. Thank you.
Yeah, and Jill, thanks to Montcordia, your organization, for supporting this. We
were happy to do it, and thank you for partnering with us. I think it worked out great. Yeah.
All right, Steve,
and
any last words?
Thank you to the both of you. It's been a real pleasure, and thank you to everybody who's participated. This is an amazing community, and I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
All right, great.
Thank
you. See you all soon.